If you're about to buy at auction, do you know the tricks agents play with you to push you to pay even more? We've got Clint Harris, accomplished investor and high-performance agent.
Yeah, I'm hoping none of my colleagues throw rocks at me for this one.
Giving us a peek behind the curtain on the 3 pressure points you might not even realize are being pushed to get you to pay even more. If you want to see more property investing content like this, make sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now let's jump into the episode with Clint Harris. Clint Harris, how you going, mate?
Really good. Thanks, Todd.
Mate, it's good to have you on the show. We're talking auctions.
Yeah.
We're talking pressure in auctions.
Yeah.
And we're talking about you kind of giving us a bit of a peek behind the curtain. I'm really interested in this because whilst I was an agent, I wasn't a predominantly auction-driven agent. You've done quite a few auctions, a lot more than I ever did.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty keen jumping into this one with you, mate.
Yeah, I'm hoping none of my colleagues throw rocks at me for this one.
Might be a few pebbles.
Yeah. But no, there's been a few things learned over the years, and I think for the audience, particularly investors that want to be unemotional with their decision making, there's a couple of things we can kind of talk about that they should be aware of.
Well, and that's why I really wanted to make this, because I want to talk about what are some I suppose skills that some investors should have in their arsenal to be able to make sure that they're not having unnecessary pressure put on them and maybe paying overs where they shouldn't be. But before we get into the 3 pressure points here, you really pushed when you and I were chatting off air about this, about the comp sales. Do you want to give us a little bit more framing around comp sales before we get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like when we're an agent that's appraising a property, we use comparable sales to identify where price is. Keep in mind, as an agent, we're a vendor's agent. We're there to go and drive price up as high as we can. That's just absolutely clear, and everyone should know that if they don't already. So the information that we're going to provide is probably going to be somewhat biased to the best possible outcome, right? That's just makes sense.
Yep.
So if there's 9 comparable sales in a marketplace and we're trying to drive the price as high as we can, which you should be doing for your vendor, then it's likely that the comparable sales that we're using are probably going to be cherry-picked to some degree in order to support the best possible result. I think as a buyer, it's important to rely on your own comparable sales and to identify all 9 of those sales so they can really understand the market and really understand where fair market price is.
So, but if I've understood you right, you're saying, let's say there's a property that maybe it's worth 700,000, but you could possibly justify it's worth 780, 800. But then also flip side of that, if you're the buyer, you could possibly justify that it's worth 600, 650.
Yeah, the subjectivity comes into play, right? And so this is where I think the information needs to be church and state. There's your information that you believe, church. There's the information that the agent's providing, state. And there should be some form of difference in regards to what the buyer is adopting and expecting. I don't think they should just simply verbatim, blindly accept whatever they're being told.
Okay. So start off with doing comp sales properly.
Yeah.
But basically looking at it the way that an agent could, looking at it the way that you could, and doing your best to remove bias from that.
Correct.
Okay. So you're at the auction. You've got your comp sales.
Yeah.
You know realistically where you should be tapping out because you've got a good understanding of that market. What's the first pressure point an agent's going to try and put on you?
Look, when you rock up to an auction, the first thing that a good agent is trying to do is create a little bit of theatre and create a bit of energy on the day. No one wants to see a low energy auction. So the neighbours are going to be there. Hey, there might be mum and dad that's there in the background. Who knows? Yeah. But we want a lot of energy there on the day. There's always going to be a couple of buyers, more neighbours, and who knows, a couple of friends of the agents or a couple of extra agents that want to come along and see how the auction plays out. So not everyone there is to be a buyer, all right? And there's only going to be a couple. So quickly, when you're a buyer that's on the auction floor, identify who's actually a buyer. They're going to have a paddle. I think that's really important to kind of scan the room and go, well, am I up against 2 people today or am I up against 10? It's a big difference. If there's 10 people, chances are there's someone that's going to be willing to pay market overs. If there's only 2, chances are, based on whatever's been quoted throughout the campaign, there's going to be less appeal.
Okay, so you're wanting to look at, are you really heading into a fight between a dozen people or is it really just you and Karen over here and everyone else has just been door knocked for the day and they're all just nosy neighbours having a look?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and what about talking to the crowd as well? This is something that you and I were chatting a little bit about off air. You find that happens a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it makes sense. If you think that you've got a couple of buyers there that are on the floor, To a degree, they might want some support from the agent that's handled the campaign so far.
Yeah.
But they also might be very focused on the auctioneer and what they've got to say, which makes complete sense. So if you see the agent off talking to a third party that's not involved in the auction, don't expect them to be a buyer. They're not necessarily a buyer. Do they have a paddle?
But that's the seed that's being planted by doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See it all the time. So with agents want to create as much appeal as possible. They want to involve as many people as possible. If you see them having a hard conversation with an extra party, it might be about the weather. It might be nothing about the campaign, all right? Yeah. But I know that agent's going to look real busy. A good one's going to be there working in the room. And if there's less buyers, well, it's important to make it look as busy as possible.
All right. So if an agent's having a chat with people in the crowd, sounds like could be a neighbor, could be mum, could be anyone.
Yeah.
Maybe it is actually a genuine buyer. What if it gets taken to that next level though? Because another pressure point can be, oh, do you mind coming over here for a quick chat? And you're actually isolated with the agent. What should a buyer be thinking, feeling, doing, really remembering in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think from that perspective, identifying that who's actually a buyer in the room is important. And the reason why I'm going to go back to that and say that again is because quite often an agent will say, look, I've got 10 conditional buyers that are going to buy this next week, right? And it's just I'm talking to all these people. Pressure, right? So we're taking the buyer off to the side now, creating some importance on it. Understand that the agent is trying to get a read in that scenario of where you're at. Where are you seeing value in this property? Sometimes if there's less buyers, that might slow down and the communication back and forward with the auctioneer may start to slow down. What we call a momentum auction is when there's more buyers and there is a lot of pace to the offers. You see this, quite often on Instagram where there's a agent that's posting up their Sydney auction or a metro auction, and you just see buyers throwing out offers everywhere. But quite often it's not the case. Usually there's a couple of off to the side conversations, feeling out where the buyers are at, so that way we can go relay that back to the vendor who's in the back of the room. So keep in mind that when that agent does come and talk to you, that's what they're trying to find out. They're trying to find out whereabouts you're seeing value in the property, because you might not be vocalizing it at that point because the momentum of the auction might not be taking it there. And the first person they're going to go communicate that to is the vendor that is out the back.
So you've got a pretty substantial portfolio. So when you purchased, did you purchase any of them at auction?
These were in Queensland. They were in that marketplace where there was less auctions. Yep. I would love to buy through auction process though as an investor. What
would you be doing in that situation?
I would have a very strong understanding of where I believe price to be.
Yep.
And I would actually share that with the agent.
So all comes back to these comp sales. So you've just been pulled off to the side. They're going, Clint, what's going on? They're trying to feel you out. Yep. And you're basically saying, hey, look, it's at 520. It's at whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. If I was there and I was in that scenario, I would point out to the agent what he already does know, which is that there's one extra buy here. Look, I'm not going to get the chance to point that out if there's 10 buyers. This is going to be a momentum auction. He's not coming up and talking to me.
Yeah.
Like it's just going to go.
Because it's just one after the other.
One after the other. It's just going to go. But if there's one or two, or if I'm the only buyer that's there, I think it's important to point that out, even though the agent's already going to know that. So we're all on the same page, okay?
Yep.
And then the next thing is I would be looking at the comparable sales that have happened recently, and this is where I'm seeing value. And I think it's okay to be honest about that. Okay, at the end of the day, the agent's going to be relaying whatever you say back to the vendor. Okay, so your information, coming back to the information you've collected before you've come here, no longer matters what the agent's got, because he's going to be listening to the market on the day. He's going to take that information and he's going to take that back, or he or she's going to take it out to the back room. So I think it's important to have that good market intelligence, because it's also going to demonstrate that you've had a thoughtful decision behind the purchase. That could be important for the vendor, because they want to know that they're not underselling the property, and you've got somebody there that's not looking to buy it necessarily at a heavy discount. They've had a good consideration of the comparable sales in the marketplace, where the fair price should be for this property, and they're presenting their opinion based off that. Because
then that also gives the agent something to go back to the vendor with, because maybe you've got an emotional vendor, you've got no idea as the buyer, but to actually say, look, here's some solid logic behind it. Is that what you're saying?
Usually do have an emotional vendor. It's,
yeah.
It's rare that we've got a cold killer on the other side there.
I think I mean like overly emotional, but you're right. Yeah.
So I think here's something that I wouldn't do as an investor. Okay. I wouldn't go and just shrug your shoulders and say that's all I'm willing to pay. That's about
Why?
the worst thing you do. Well, it's giving the agent no confidence that they should be actually listening to the offer that you're making. Like, how have you actually come to that conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go and just hit the agent between the eyes and say, that's all I'm willing to play, forget it, I'm not willing to talk about more, I think you're putting yourself in a position where you're giving both the agent and consequently the vendor a bit of a lack of confidence that you're going to be someone they want to work with. Understand the vendor and most vendors want to see their property sell for as much as possible. Yeah, above market value.
Everyone does.
But in lieu of that, they want to see fair market value for their property, okay? So if you've got somebody that's presenting themselves as a tough negotiator that just wants to buy it at a discount, you're almost setting the tone that accepting your offer is failure.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, agents have an ego, right?
This is good stuff, Clint, because it's exactly the same thing. Whether you were to go to, nah, that's just it, take it or leave it, or actually, here's how I came to blah, blah, blah.
Such a better approach.
But then they don't feel like they're being screwed. They feel like, okay, maybe there's some legitimacy to this. I don't feel like I'm losing by saying yes.
Yeah. And you know what? The amount of property investors that I've met that have done well, as far as their experience goes, but they can come off a little bit harsh. All right. It's just like, bang, this is all I'm going to do.
Yep.
And it's like, well, why is that? It's like, because that's what I think it's worth. And it's like, okay, well, how do you come to that conclusion? And I think if there's some credible evidence or there's some comparable sales that really support where value is, then that could be helpful information for that agent to take back to the vendor and go, look, this isn't somebody that just wants to buy your property at a discount, or isn't somebody that can't afford your property. It's because they're seeing value based on this research they've done. And that's a very big difference. As an agent, if I'm, accepting an offer and working with it, I want to know how the buyer came up with that. Is that because they decided not to buy the other one that's down the road that we're competing with? Is that because they came up with some comparable sales that have supported where they think price is? Or is it just because they want a discount? And I can tell you now, if you're going to contribute to the information in regards to a marketing campaign and have a considered point of perspective, it's going to go a long way, at least in the eyes of the agent. Even if there's a disagreement on where price is, at least that's a very constructive way to present your offer.
I like this, Clint. So, and what's our last pressure point we've got here? We're talking about talking to the vendor, but we're not talking about talking to the vendor like in public. We're talking about all right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a minute. Is that right?
Yep. So this is particularly when there's a momentum auction, okay? So you might have multiple offers. There's a lot of energy going around and it's running hot. Sometimes a strategy in this scenario would be just to actually slow that down to sustain that momentum a bit. And so what often I'll hear is that, look, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to go back at the back and seek the vendor's instructions. We'll be back in a moment. And this could be a strategy that either an auctioneer or the agent decided to employ. And you're going back out the back and all of a sudden there's a huge high five.
Yeah.
Okay. With your vendor.
But that's not necessarily the thought that everyone else is having. They're thinking like, we're possibly not at reserve, or
straight face.
Yep.
Right. There's no smiles on the auction floor outside of the lucky buyer. So we're going out the back there and we're very, very conservative with the behavior. And then usually if things are going well, there's two vendors there, or a vendor that's absolutely ecstatic with what's going on, smiling, and we make sure that the blinds are down.
Close.
Yeah, they can hear everything. The blinds are down, can't see it. So there's a big high five just to make sure that they've got a connection to their agent during the actual process, making sure they're all happy, confirming the instructions on the reserve price, and then going back out. And the auctioneer may call it on the market at that point in time. They may not. They may just let it keep going. But it's basically a tool to go and create a little bit of sustenance in the process there.
Now, everywhere's different state by state, but as far as New South Wales is concerned, because that's where you operate, do you have to call it on the market when it is?
No, you don't have to call it on the market. And often, we'll have somebody that's looking to find out what that price is. They'll go, is it on the market? And know that if the auctioneer chooses to call it on the market, it was in their interest to call it on the market. Right. Okay. They're not calling on the market to let you know, all right, we're $1 over, so everybody knows we're on the market.
Yep.
Some auctioneers might do that, but in my experience, that's not the best method. They'll call it when they want to see some rocket fuel on that fire.
So you could have been on the market 50 grand, 100 grand ago.
Could be 100 grand in.
Yeah. All right. So if someone does see agent and auctioneer, go out the back, talk to the vendor, what should they be doing then? Should they just be kind of like holding tight and going, it's not the end of the world. This isn't a bad thing. This isn't a good thing. What's the takeaway?
I think the big takeaway is have the information that tells you what you feel this property is worth. We're talking to investors today, right? So we don't want to buy properties emotionally. We want to buy properties with good quality research that's telling us that we're buying at either fair market value or ideally under if you're trying to build equity into the deal. So have that information, and irrespective of what happens on the day, the most critical information, the true north, is the information that you brought to the party, not what happened on the day.
Everything throughout this is really just different pressure points. It's different things to try and get people to stop acting logically and start acting emotionally. Because at the end of the day, as an agent, that's what you get paid to do. Realistically, get the highest price absolutely possible. But if you stay, like you said, to that true north, you know where value is, you've got confidence that you've done your research properly with your comp sales, then you've got the confidence to be able to stand there and just, I guess, kind of enjoy the real estate theater that's in front of you.
Yeah.
And just look at it for what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And keep in mind, there's different buyers out there. There's people that have got their dream home in front of them, and then there's investors. My job as an agent is to bring them all together. Okay. With an investor, some do get emotional. Some do go way above. And I often think that might be ego that's coming into the mix to make sure they knock out the market. I don't know if that's always because they see intrinsic value well beyond the rest of the market.
I don't know if you'd agree or disagree with this, but personally, I always used to see that as the same thing as you can have a child, but it doesn't make you a parent. You can buy a property, but it doesn't really make you an investor just because you have an investment property.
I like that.
I always looked at it as they were those people. They were the people that technically had an investment property or purchased it, but they weren't really investors.
Yeah, coming into being a real estate agent 10 years ago, I thought I was going to meet a lot of fantastic investors and see a lot of great things and have a lot of great conversations with similar minds, and it just wasn't the case. I met a lot of people that were buying one or two properties, and I forget the statistic in Australia of how many people only own one investment property or two, but I think it's more than 95%.
Something along those lines,
right? Yeah. So it's really rare for someone to buy investment properties well and put themselves in a position where they can continue to benefit from that and continue to grow.
Clint Harris from the agency, thank you so much for jumping on the show, mate. I think you've got some absolute gold in here.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me, Todd.